The sun had just started to rise over the neatly organized suburban neighborhood where I lived. The streets were lined with cookie-cutter houses, each with perfectly manicured lawns, thanks to the ever-watchful eyes of the Homeowners Association. On the surface, it looked peaceful, but anyone who lived here long enough knew there was always a storm brewing somewhere. And that storm had a name: Karen. Karen wasn't just any HOA board member. She was the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood. She strutted around like she owned every street, barking orders about trash cans being out for too long, complaining about lawn heights, and issuing nasty letters about unapproved decorations. If you so much as parked your car an inch outside the lines, Karen made sure you heard about it. But the real trouble started because of my car. Not just any car, my bright red Mustang GT, a car I'd rebuilt with my own hands. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol of years of hard work, patience, and countless hours in the garage. I kept it spotless, polished to a mirror shine, and I admit, it stood out in a neighborhood filled with bland SUVs and family minivans. One Saturday morning, while I was wiping down the hood, humming to myself, I noticed a teenage boy wandering over from the opposite side of the cul-de-sac. Tall, lanky, and wearing a smug grin, he was instantly recognizable: Karen's son, Kyle. He had the same entitled expression as his mother, like the world owed him everything. "Nice car," Kyle said, circling the Mustang like a vulture eyeing prey. His hands hovered close to the paint, and I subtly shifted to block him. "So, when are you giving it to me?" I laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. "Excuse me." Kyle folded his arms, his smirk growing wider. "You heard me. My mom says people like you don't need cars like this. You should hand it over to someone who actually appreciates it. And that someone is me." I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep my cool. "Kid, this isn't a toy you pick off a shelf. I've been working on this car for years. It's not for sale, and it sure as hell isn't being given away." Instead of backing down, Kyle scowled. "That's not fair. You're old, you probably don't even drive it fast. I deserve it more. My mom said she can make you hand it over if she wants to." At that, I couldn't help but chuckle. "Tell your mom good luck with that." Kyle stormed off, muttering under his breath, but I didn't think much of it. I'd had run-ins with Karen before, but nothing too serious. She hated that I didn't bow down to her endless rules, and she hated even more that I didn't react when she tried to intimidate me. But what I didn't know was that Kyle went straight to his mother and twisted the story into something outrageous. By the time Karen stormed out of her house later that afternoon, she was already breathing fire. She marched across the street, her phone in hand, glaring daggers at me. "You tried to steal from my son," she screeched before I could even greet her. "You refused to give him what he deserves." I blinked in disbelief. "What he deserves?" "Karen, your son demanded my car like it was some kind of birthday present. That Mustang is mine. End of story." Karen puffed herself up like a peacock. "You live in this neighborhood because of the HOA's generosity, and as an HOA board member, I have the authority to decide what is and isn't appropriate. A flashy sports car like that? Totally inappropriate. My son has been promised a car, and your Mustang is the perfect fit. If you don't hand it over willingly, I'll make sure the police handle this." I smirked, trying not to laugh. "The police, huh? You really think they're going to arrest me for owning my own car?" Karen's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Oh, you'll see. You've messed with the wrong family." And with that, she spun on her heel and dialed 911, right there in the middle of the street, loud enough for half the block to hear. What she didn't realize, what nobody knew in this neighborhood, was that I wasn't just some random resident with a nice car. I was the chief of police for our city. And Karen was about to find out just how badly she had overplayed her hand. Karen's shrill voice echoed across the neighborhood as she barked into her phone. "Yes, officer, I need you here immediately," she wailed dramatically. "There's a dangerous man threatening my son. He's refusing to cooperate, and I fear for our safety. He's hoarding stolen property, a Mustang. Yes, stolen. Please hurry before he does something violent." I leaned against the hood of my car, shaking my head in disbelief. She wasn't just exaggerating. She was flat out inventing a crime. Across the street, curtains shifted as neighbors peeked out, curious about the commotion. Karen always loved an audience, And now she had one. Kyle stood a few feet behind her, smirking with his arms crossed, clearly pleased with himself. He probably thought the police would swoop in, drag me away in handcuffs, and hand him the keys to my car. The arrogance was almost laughable. Within minutes, the faint wail of sirens reached the cul-de-sac. Karen straightened her posture, waving her arms as if she were guiding a rescue helicopter. "Over here. Officers, over here," she screeched, practically hopping with excitement. 2 squad cars rolled to a stop, lights flashing but sirens now silent. Officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts but not drawn, professional, calm, surveying the scene. I recognized them instantly. They were part of my department. In fact, I'd personally signed off on their training. "Officers, thank goodness you're here." Karen rushed forward, crocodile tears already forming in her eyes. "This man, this criminal, has threatened my child. He's hiding a stolen sports car right in plain sight. Look at it." She pointed at my Mustang as if it were evidence of some major felony. One of the officers, Davis, glanced at the car, then at me. His expression twitched, like he was trying not to laugh. "Ma'am, could you explain exactly what happened?" Karen placed a dramatic hand over her chest. "My son asked for his rightful property, this Mustang, and this man became aggressive. He refuses to hand it over, even though my son deserves it. He's dangerous. You need to arrest him immediately." Kyle chimed in, nodding eagerly. "Yeah, he even threatened me. Said I'd never touch the car and laughed in my face." Now, the neighbors were fully invested. A small crowd had gathered at the ends of driveways, phones in hand, recording. Some shook their heads, others whispered, clearly entertained. After all, nothing spices up a Saturday morning like Karen making a fool of herself. I stayed calm, arms folded, waiting for the right moment. Davis turned toward me, his eyes twinkling knowingly. "Sir, would you like to share your side of the story?" Before I could open my mouth, Karen cut in. "Don't listen to him. He's a liar. Arrest him right now. Do your jobs." The second officer, Ramirez, frowned. "Ma'am, we still need to hear from him." "That's how this works." Karen stomped her foot like a child denied candy. "No. If you don't arrest him immediately, I'll call your supervisor and make sure you're both fired. You work for me. This entire neighborhood pays your salary, you know." That did it. Several neighbors actually laughed out loud at her nonsense. Ramirez shot me a side glance, silently asking if he should play along a bit longer. I gave a subtle nod. I finally pushed off the hood of my Mustang and walked toward the officers, my calm presence drawing even more attention from the crowd. Karen instantly recoiled, whispering loudly to Kyle, "See? He's approaching them aggressively. He's dangerous." I stopped just a few feet from Davis and Ramirez, lowered my voice slightly, and said, "Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm curious. Do you need me to show identification now, or would you prefer the formal introduction later?" Davis smirked, clearly enjoying the theatrics. "Up to you, Chief." Karen's head snapped toward him. "Chief? What chief? Don't let him trick you. He's nothing." I reached into my wallet and flipped open my badge, holding it up for the entire block to see. The golden emblem gleamed in the sunlight. "Allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm Chief, last name, head of the city's police department. And you," I looked directly at Karen, "just called in a false report against the police chief." The crowd gasped. Phones tilted upward as people tried to get a better shot of Karen's face, which drained of color faster than a melting snowman. Kyle's smug grin vanished, replaced by wide-eyed panic. Karen stammered, her voice cracking. "And no, you can't be, you're lying. This is harassment. He's impersonating an officer." Ramirez spoke firmly. "Ma'am, he's not impersonating anyone. That's our chief. We work directly under him." For the first time, Karen was speechless. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The neighbors' chuckles turned into full-blown laughter, and I could see phones shaking as people tried to film without collapsing from amusement. I let the silence linger, the weight of the truth crushing whatever fantasy Karen had built for herself. Then, I spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. Calling in a false police report is a crime. Accusing someone of theft without a shred of evidence is slander, and trying to manipulate officers into taking property from a lawful owner. I narrowed my eyes. That's not just entitled, Karen. That's criminal. Kyle tugged on his mother's sleeve, whispering nervously. But Karen wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Her pride was wounded, and people like her don't back down easily. She straightened, puffing out her chest, and snapped. You think you can intimidate me just because you're the so-called chief? This neighborhood has rules, and I'll make sure the HOA deals with you if the police won't. I almost laughed at her desperation. She still thought the HOA had more power than the law. What she didn't realize was that her nightmare had only just begun. For a moment, the entire cul-de-sac was frozen in disbelief. The tension hung in the air like thick fog. Neighbors whispered to one another, trying not to laugh too loudly at Karen's humiliation. A few even angled their phones higher, clearly delighted they had front-row seats to the neighborhood's drama show. But Karen? She refused to accept reality. Her pride wouldn't let her back down. She tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder, straightened her blouse, and looked at me with burning eyes. You think this means anything? She spat, gesturing toward my badge. You might be some big shot out there, but in here, the HOA rules are above everything. And I'm on the board. If you think a shiny piece of metal makes you untouchable, you're wrong. The HOA can fine you, restrict you, and if necessary, make sure you're evicted. Her voice carried across the street, but instead of inspiring fear, her words made several neighbors burst out laughing. One older man across the road shouted, Karen, the HOA can't evict the chief of police for crying out loud. His wife smacked him lightly on the arm, but even she was grinning. Karen's son Kyle scowled, trying to regain some ground. Mom's right. You're not allowed to keep a car like that here. It's too loud, too flashy. We've decided it belongs to me. I raised an eyebrow. We've decided? And what court of law do you and your mother represent? Kyle faltered, his ears turning red, but Karen quickly stepped back in. Don't you mock us. The HOA board is meeting next week, and we'll see what they have to say about this. This disgrace of a car cluttering our neighborhood. She jabbed a finger toward the Mustang like it was offensive to breathe the same air. Officer Davis cleared his throat, trying to remain professional but clearly struggling to contain his amusement. Ma'am, just so we're clear, the HOA has zero jurisdiction over personal property when it comes to criminal accusations. They can't seize vehicles, they can't demand ownership, and they certainly can't override the chief of police. Karen's jaw tightened. Then I'll make a formal complaint. I'll demand your resignation, Chief, for intimidating my family and abusing your position. Now the crowd couldn't hold it anymore. Laughter erupted like fireworks. Some neighbors clapped mockingly, others shook their heads. Karen's legendary entitlement had hit new heights, and nobody was taking her seriously. I let the laughter fade before speaking, my voice calm but edged with authority. Karen, you filed a false police report. You claimed I threatened your son, that this car was stolen, and that there was danger to your family. Every word you said was a lie. Do you know what that means? Her eyes flickered nervously, but she crossed her arms. I was protecting my son. That's not a crime. I stepped closer, my tone firm. It's exactly a crime. You wasted police resources. You tried to weaponize law enforcement to steal property that doesn't belong to you. And you attempted to defame an officer of the law. If you weren't standing here in front of your neighbors, I'd already have you in the back of a squad car. Her face paled, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Kyle looked between us, his bravado crumbling like a sandcastle against the tide. Still, Karen tried one last desperate card. Fine. Maybe the police won't do anything, but the HOA will. I'll have the board fine you every single day that car sits on your driveway. You'll regret crossing me. At that, I chuckled, shaking my head slowly. Karen, you really don't know when to quit, do you? Let me tell you something you apparently don't understand. The law outranks the HOA. Always has, always will. And as chief of police, I deal with far bigger problems than whether a nosy neighbor thinks my car is too flashy. I turned to Davis and Ramirez. Officers, please note this incident in our records. We're not filing charges today, but if another false call comes in from this address, We'll treat it as harassment and pursue prosecution." Both officers nodded in unison. Ramirez added firmly, "Understood, Chief." "Consider it logged." The color drained further from Karen's face. Her neighbors whispered louder now, some shaking their heads in disgust. One woman muttered, "About time someone put her in her place." Another said, "She thought she could bully him?" Kyle tugged on his mother's arm, whispering urgently, "Mom, let's just go inside." But Karen wasn't ready to retreat yet. Her pride was bruised beyond repair, and she wasn't about to slink away in silence. She pointed one trembling finger at me and hissed, "This isn't over. You may think you've won today, but I'll find a way to take that car. You'll see." Her words, instead of striking fear, only earned more laughter from the crowd. At this point, Karen had become the neighborhood's entertainment, her threats empty and ridiculous. I gave her a cool smile, my voice steady. "You can try, Karen. But let me make one thing perfectly clear. This Mustang isn't going anywhere. And neither am I. The only thing that's going to disappear is your credibility. Every time you pull a stunt like this, you dig yourself deeper. Keep going, and soon even the HOA won't want you around." The silence that followed was deafening. Karen glared, her face beet red, then spun around and stormed back toward her house, dragging Kyle with her. The crowd slowly began to disperse, chuckling, shaking their heads, and whispering about how this story was going to spread like wildfire. As the last neighbor disappeared behind their front door, Officer Davis smirked and said under his breath, "Chief, I think Karen just lost her crown as queen of the HOA." I laughed softly, patting the hood of my Mustang. "Good riddance. But something tells me she's not done causing trouble." And I was right. Karen wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. For a few days after the incident, the neighborhood seemed strangely calm. Karen avoided eye contact when she went to collect her mail, and Kyle kept his distance, no longer swaggering across the street to gawk at my car. The whispers from neighbors hadn't died down, though. Every barbecue, every evening stroll, someone was retelling the story of how the infamous Karen tried to seize the police chief's Mustang and ended up humiliating herself in front of half the block. But people like Karen never learn. Humiliation only makes them more dangerous because they crave control. Sure enough, on the following Friday evening, as I was sitting on the porch enjoying a cup of coffee, I noticed something suspicious. Kyle was pacing near my driveway, glancing nervously up and down the street. A moment later, Karen appeared, holding a stack of papers. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her eyes blazing with determination. I sighed. Round two. They marched right up to me without hesitation. Karen shoved the papers into my hands like she was delivering a court summons. "Here. Read it. This is an official HOA violation notice. Your Mustang is considered a community disturbance. You are being fined $500 for every day it remains in plain view. Failure to comply will result in the HOA taking further action." I flipped through the so-called paperwork. It was nothing more than a poorly typed document with the HOA letterhead pasted at the top. The language was laughably vague. No legal citations, no actual enforcement process. Clearly, Karen had either written it herself or bullied some other board member into signing off. "Karen," I said calmly, setting the papers down on the porch railing, "this isn't worth the paper it's printed on. The HOA doesn't have the authority to fine me over a legally registered, insured vehicle parked on my own property. You're wasting your time." Her nostrils flared. "We'll see about that. You think you're above the rules, but nobody is above the HOA. If you won't cooperate, I'll escalate. Maybe I'll even have the car towed myself." Now that made me laugh out loud. "You'd try to tow the personal vehicle of the chief of police? That would go well." Karen's face twisted, but Kyle jumped in, eager to add fuel to the fire. "Mom's right. You can't stop us. The HOA runs this neighborhood, not you. That car is ours, whether you like it or not." I stepped forward, lowering my voice just enough to make Kyle flinch. "Son, let me make something perfectly clear. You so much as touch this car without my permission, and you won't be dealing with the HOA. You'll be dealing with the full weight of the law. And trust me, the law doesn't bend to tantrums." Karen bristled, but before she could snap back, a familiar voice called out, "Karen, what on earth are you doing now?" It was Mr. Thompson, the HOA president. He walked up, flanked by two other board members. Apparently, word of Karen's violation notice had reached the rest of the HOA. His face was a mix of embarrassment and irritation. Karen straightened like a child caught red-handed. I'm enforcing our community rules. This man's car is disruptive. It lowers property values. Enough, Thompson cut her off. The board never approved any violation. You don't have the authority to issue fines on your own. And trying to strong-arm a neighbor, let alone the chief of police, is reckless and unacceptable. The other board members nodded, one of them muttering, "She's been abusing her position for too long." Karen's face turned scarlet. "You can't do this to me. I am the HOA." Thompson shook his head. "Not anymore. As of this moment, you're suspended from the board. We'll be holding a vote on whether to remove you entirely." The gasp that escaped Karen's lips was almost theatrical. Kyle shouted, "You can't do this to my mom." But nobody paid him any attention. I folded my arms, watching the scene unfold. "Looks like your power trip just hit a dead end, Karen." She turned to me, eyes wild. "This is all your fault. You've poisoned them against me." I met her glare evenly. "No, Karen. You did this to yourself. You tried to steal from me. You lied to the police. You abused your HOA authority. And now everyone sees you for what you are." For the first time since I'd known her, Karen didn't have a comeback. She stood frozen, trembling with rage, before finally grabbing Kyle's arm and dragging him back toward their house. Her exit was met with silence. Not the silence of respect, but of finality. Her reign as the neighborhood tyrant was officially over. Mr. Thompson sighed, turning toward me. "Chief, I want to apologize. Karen's behavior has been out of line for a long time, and we should have stepped in sooner. Consider this matter handled." I nodded. "Appreciate it. But let's be clear, if Karen ever tries to weaponize the HOA again, or makes another false police report, I'll treat it as criminal harassment." I've been patient, but patience has its limits. The board members agreed quickly, clearly eager to avoid any further trouble. They left soon after, leaving me standing by my Mustang, the evening sun casting a golden glow over the polished hood. I patted the car with a grin. "Looks like we won, girl." From that day forward, Karen's voice grew quieter in the neighborhood. She was no longer feared, just pitted. The HOA stripped her of power. Neighbors rolled their eyes at her antics, and Kyle never dared step foot near my property again. And my Mustang? She remained right where she belonged, safely parked in my driveway, gleaming like a trophy not just of horsepower, but of standing up to entitlement and proving that respect can't be demanded. It has to be earned.